A well-known wise man once said, "Wars begin when you will, but they do not end when you please."
We are on track to complete all of America's military objectives shortly, very shortly.
Donald Trump seems highly unlikely to subscribe to the thoughts of an Italian philosopher. But through the lens of the Iran war, Niccolo Machiavelli's words might be really pertinent as we try and imagine the end of the war.
You have to continue to kill the decision maker, his successor, his successor, his successor, and his successor, until you get to an individual who no longer accepts the appointment.
It's a confronting view about this war, if it happens to stop short of regime change. Confronting about what he thinks is the only way the Iran war can end.
So, worst case scenario is that this regime survived.
Hey Trump, you are fired. You are familiar with this sentence. Thank you for your attention to this matter.
As Donald Trump seems every day to back further away from regime change as his goal in Iran, experts like Hans-Jakob Schindler get more and more worried. Trump states the fact that they are obliterating Iran militarily, but that's not the game Iran was prepared for, and not the one the Iranian regime are playing.
Hey Trump, you're fired like a pharaoh.
Now, they're sending individual rockets, but not once a day, 3-4 times a day, 5 times a day, to make sure that the maximum economic damage is done. Now they are trying to not overwhelm the air defenses in Dubai, but fire at Dubai every other day to make sure that the airport keeps being interrupted. The investors are going away from the Gulf, right? So they are smarter and they learned the lessons even the last 2 years. Now, the real tragic situation here is that this military confrontation between Israel and the US was unavoidable, and it was guaranteed to happen the moment the first bomb fell on Iran in June 2025.
So the reasons the Europeans, for instance, had always said no to attacking Iran's nuclear program was the cost of it. To paraphrase, if you attack once, they are just going to rebuild, and then you have to attack again, etc., etc.
It was clear that once you start dealing militarily with the nuclear dossier, you will have to do this over and over and over again. Because even during the time of George W. Bush, a president that no one could excuse for not being bellicose enough, that president said, you can't bomb knowledge when the discussion was about military options for Iran, which means you set back the nuclear dossier in 2025, you have to attack it again in 2026, at the latest in 2027, because the Iranians are still understanding how to build a centrifuge. They still have the technical knowledge on how to do that.
So if you believe Hans-Jakob that 2025's 12-day war was the first step on a hamster wheel, then how do you get off? Now the decision has been made to begin, how do we stop?
The only hope you have in a regime that is set up like this, and the same structure is in the Revolutionary Guards, the same structure is in the Basij, the same structure is in the conventional military. If you have a system that is built on collective decision-making, you have to continue, and this is very brutal, but this is the only way to do it, you have to continue to kill the decision-maker, his successor, his successor, his successor, and his successor, until you get to an individual who no longer accepts the appointment, and therefore the regime internally begins to destabilize. This is a very brutal strategy. This will take many weeks. This will require very good intelligence information. But if you do not do this strategy, all you do is you exchange the personnel and the regime will continue operating as intended.
So this is the only point where Trump and Hans-Jakob are in some way on the same page in regard to how long there is to go in the war.
All of America's military objectives shortly, very shortly. We're going to hit them extremely hard over the next 2 to 3 weeks. We're going to bring them back to the Stone Ages where they belong.
About halfway. Yeah. So we are nowhere near a point where the regime internally is destabilized at all, right? So we have not yet seen even an army general who's possibly leading an organization that is not quite as ideologically bound to the regime.
If we are looking for signs of weakness in the regime, then perhaps just one moment has provided it: the killing of Ali Larijani, senior regime figure killed 3 weeks into the war. The missile that took his life was pinpointed on his specific apartment block on his specific flaw. That means one of the very, very few people who knew where he lived told Mossad or the CIA.
There are many other guys. But because it happened on week 3, and it happened by a rocket attack against a particular part of one house within Tehran. Not half of northern Tehran was destroyed, one part of one house, and Ali Larijani was dead. That means the regime continues to be absolutely penetrated, undermined. There is leakages left, right, and center after 3 weeks of war, which means there is enough disloyalty within the regime that could lead to its destabilization.
Hans Jakob is an expert in counterterrorism who fears that if the US and Israel don't topple the regime, it will leave the world and Iran in a really bad situation. Terrorism outside of Iran, chaos and murder within.
In the week before Nowruz, last week, there was an official announcement on state television that says anyone going to the street to demonstrate on Nowruz will be shot, no questions asked, and we will be more brutal than we were in January. Official announcement. Once this war is over, the announcement continue, we will take revenge on every single Iranian inside Iran or outside Iran who stood against us in our hour of need. That is the first announced mass murder in history, right? So worst case scenario is that this regime survives. It cannot be in any of these aspects a European interest that this war ends now and the regime continues to exist. I am critical why this was done, but now that it's been on the works, as I'm sad to say, the Americans and the Israelis must not fail.
So how long does the regime have to survive to win the war? And are the US and Israel actually committed to ending the regime? Both have at times expressed the wish for a new regime, but timing is everything. And for both Benjamin Netanyahu and Donald Trump, elections loom. US midterms in November. Netanyahu must hold elections by the end of October.
So that means by late summer, this needs to be done and dusted with. So that's the unmovable, absolute timeline of this conflict. It will be done by the end summer this year. Otherwise, both going to have massive political problems in their election, and neither one is very keen to lose those elections. Donald Trump, because he doesn't like to lose elections, as we all know, and Benjamin Netanyahu, because if he does lose the election, he has a string of court cases lined up. None of them are going to go well for him.
So we end where we started. Wars begin when you will, but they do not end when you please. Do these Machiavellian words fit where this Iran war is going? And how do you think it's going to end?